when he was in Ireland. This is Frederick Douglass, aged 27 years old. I teach at a university in America, Quinnipiac, unpronounceable, and we currently have a Frederick Douglass exhibit to mark his 200th birthday. And we have, and you can pass this around, a beautiful statue of Frederick Douglass depicting him aged 27 in Ireland. And Frederick Douglass, as we're going to hear, admired Daniel O'Connell, and in this statue he's wearing Daniel O'Connell's cloak, Abraham Lincoln's waistcoat, and President Obama's right hand. And in his left hand he's clutching his life story, the narrative. So we have copies if you want it. So, to start, has anybody not heard of Frederick Douglass before? So Frederick Douglass was actually born Frederick Bailey. He was born into slavery in Maryland. His mother was a slave. He didn't know his father, but it was thought his father was his mother's master. His mother worked on a different plantation, and he only saw her before she died 6 or 7 times. But on one of those occasions, she referred to him as her little Valentine. Frederick never knew the year or day of his birth, but when he was an adult, he chose the 14th of February as his birthday in honor of his mother. And in America, Black History Month is February. One of the reasons is because it's Frederick's chosen birthday. Ireland was always very important to him, and as a teenager he was working in Baltimore on docks, and 2 Irish dock workers said, "What is a fine young man like you doing as a slave? You should escape, go to the northern states." And even though he wasn't sure if they were being honest, from that point onwards he knew he had to escape from slavery. And he knew that education, reading and writing would be his pathway to escape. And so he self-taught himself to read and write. And again, when reading, he came across Irish writers, Irish patriots, and they very much influenced him. At the age of 20, any of you here 20? Most of my students are 20, and I say at that age, you're not 20, sir. Anyway, at the age of 20, Frederick escaped north, and it was a very brave act, and he escaped to New York, helped by a free black woman, Anna Murray. And when he got to New York, he married Anna, and he also changed his name to Frederick Douglass. Now, at that point, he could have gone to Canada, where he would have been safe, but he chose to stay in America to help other slaves escape. So he settled in New Bedford with Anna. Shortly after, he started to attend abolition meetings. He was asked to speak, and he was such a brilliant orator. He was also very musical, so this is appropriate. He was such a brilliant orator that he was employed full-time to lecture for the American Anti-Slavery Society. He was the first escaped slave to do so pretty incredible. But because he was so handsome, and he was very handsome, and so articulate and so well-read, people doubted he'd been a slave. And so, to prove them wrong, in 1845 he published his life story, his narrative. But again, this put him in great danger, because under the Fugitive Slave Act, any escaped slave could be captured and returned to their former master. So his friends persuaded him to leave the country, to go to Britain. He arrived in Britain at the end of August 1845, but he'd heard that some Quakers in Dublin were willing to reprint his narrative so that he would have income. So he spent 2 days in Liverpool, and then the 29th of August 1845 he arrived in Dublin. That night he wrote to friends in America and said, "Here I am, safe in dear old Ireland." He intended to stay for 4 days, but he was made to feel so welcome, and as he said, for the first time he was made to feel an equal to white people. So he stayed in Ireland for 4 months. And while in Ireland he was persuaded to make speeches, and he gave almost 50 lectures. And the very first place he lectured was City Hall. At that stage it was called the Royal Exchange, and there was such a crowd that he never lectured there again. He was so popular. and the date of his lecture was exactly 7 years since he'd escaped from slavery. So now I'd like you to hear some of the words that Frederick spoke on that night by Don Mullan.
Thank you, Christine. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that I am an unfit person to speak before such a distinguished audience, but I have come to Ireland to plead the cause of the oppressed black man. It is a curious circumstance of my life that on this very day, 7 years ago, I ran away, or to explain it better, I took myself, my body and my limbs away from my master in Maryland. As a fugitive slave, I did not seem possible that one day I would stand amongst the people I so admire. I stand in the land of Curran, of Sheridan, of Grattan, and of O'Connell, as one who, like them, also seeks freedom for his people. As a slave, I heard of the name of O'Connell as a man admired by all who love liberty and hate oppression the world over. I know him as a champion of the poor and of the oppressed slave, and I thank him for that. But what, ladies and gentlemen, is slavery? Slavery is a system that makes a chattel of a man, which tears the husband and wife asunder, and which deprives men of all their rights as human beings. Should not a system such as this be abolished? I thank you for your kind patience and listening to my simple and humble words. Thank you.